truth that we are granted certain unalienable rights, not by a king, but by an almighty creator, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our foundational principles are non-negotiable. They are inscribed on our national soul. My fellow Americans, the spirit of hope is spreading. Everyone can feel it, and it will sweep across this nation when we elect Donald J. Trump, the 47th President of the United States. May God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Glenn Youngkin, Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia. Just ahead, more headliners taking the stage, including South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. And, of course, we're standing by for an appearance from the now official Republican nominee, Donald Trump. We'll be right back.
Mr. Bob Unani.
Of course I did. The reporting I have is that privately, the efforts to nudge President Biden to step aside and get out of the race are continuing quite aggressively, even though the public calls have quieted quite significantly. The public calls have quieted, A, because of the tragedy of Saturday, the attempted assassination. Also, Democrats believe they need to have a unified message while the Republicans are having their convention. And the president, again today, in the Lester Holt interview, said he's not getting out of the race, so Democrats believe it's counterproductive to be in a public argument
said something like, unless a train hits
with the leader of the party. But I'm told that Democratic members of Congress continue to lobby the White House, the president's inner circle, and someone else who is lobbying them now is the veteran Democratic pollster Stanley Greenberg, who's been at this for decades, one of the most respected voices in the Democratic Party, worked on both of Bill Clinton's winning presidential campaigns. And I'm told he has been sending virtually daily memos to the president's inner circle, analyzing the polling data and making the case that we are past the point of no return. And that President Biden is not only going to lose, but that Stan has been making the case he's going to lose in a way that wipes out the party. That they will lose the House, they will lose any chance of taking back the House and the Senate. Just very quickly, lose everything was one description of a Democrat who's seen these memos. Devastating was the description of another. Again, making the case privately, and some of these Democrats I've talked to, the sources say that the effort will continue privately at least till this is done, and if the numbers keep going the way they're going, which they argue is this way, that then it'll get public again.
Chris?
And Jake, to pick up on that, you were just reporting about this huge influx of money coming from Elon Musk at a time when contributions from big donors to Joe Biden are drying up. I mean, one of the big stories in recent days has been the Hollywood backlash that came after George Clooney's famous op-ed in the Times, and a lot of anger at Jeffrey Katzenberg, the great movie director who is a co-chairman of the Biden campaign and had gotten a lot of money, a lot of big contributions from a lot of rich people in Hollywood, and a lot of them went to that event where the fundraiser where Biden spoke, were not impressed about it and are now saying, what'd you get us into here?
And David Axelrod, I mean, this is an effort that has proceeded behind closed doors, as John was talking about. We know that Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader, met with him. We know Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer. People are trying to be very blunt and honest with President Biden, but from everything I hear, he's still fairly ensconced in a cocoon of top advisors and family who just don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the issue here. I mean, there's no dearth of information, no dearth of people who are delivering the same message. And of course, the leaders are very concerned about what the implications are for their members in the fall, and particularly if Donald Trump wins the presidential election, that gives them a greater sense of urgency to try and at least win one of the houses. But all of this it always comes down to the same thing. First of all, what information is actually reaching the president? Because he has a very insular group around him, and they filter the information that gets to him. Does he understand where he really is in this race?
And it's gotten more insular.
I'm sorry?
It's gotten more insular in this time.
Yes, because I think that people who come with discouraging information are sort of not invited back.
John, do you have any information about whether or not the president has gotten the information?
Not directly that information. A Democratic lawmaker I spoke to out there said that the lawmaker is convinced that at least some of those around the president, and again, being very careful not to get into private conversations with the White House, but that some of them get the depth of this, was the way it was put
I have
to me.
no doubt.
The question, you raised a question, are they making it to him? Because if you see the president when he's asked about this, number one, he won't even say if he watched the debate, or he couldn't remember if he watched the debate. That seems pretty striking. If you had a horrible performance, you think the first thing you want to do to watch it, to learn from it. But he keeps saying that's not what the polling says. In his public remarks. Now, again, they're public remarks, and he could just be trying to put a positive spin on it. But if you've watched the president and everything he has said, either at the events he's done or the couple of interviews he's done since the debate, what he says about the public polling is simply not anywhere close to the truth about what it says.
And it's not, and the private polling, I think, is worse than the public polling. But look, there are a couple of people who are key in this. The guy who he trusts more than anyone on these issues is Mike Donilon, who's been with him for decades. Very, very smart guy, but very much attached to the president. And I don't know what Mike's telling him about this.
I will say that Stan, you could say Democratic members of Congress, the Democratic pollster, why do you care about the pollster? One, Stan's history is very good in the party. Number two, they do view him somewhat as a prod. He prodded Biden during the midterms, saying Democrats need to change their message on crime, or you're going to go. He works closely with James Carville at a group called the Democracy Corps, and Carville has been, poked the White House. David has taken grief from the White House when he has spoken candidly about what he says to the president. But Stan does have a very good relationship with Anita Dunn and with Mike Donilon and with Steve Ricchetti, some of the people who are closest to the president. He's worked with them for years.
Well, and my question too, and actually, Axe, I'd be interested to know kind of your thoughts on it, is obviously the thing that everyone has been so careful not to talk about is the political impact of the assassination attempt over the weekend.
Yeah,
because everyone has been justifiably very focused on the safety of President Trump.
Let's listen to South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem.
Thank you. Good evening. You all look fantastic. I love the cowboy hats. And a shout out to South Dakota. Hi. Woo. Listen, I'm Governor Kristi Noem from the great state of South Dakota. Leadership has consequences. It matters who's in the White House. Now, I've been governor under both President Trump and Joe Biden. And people ask me all the time, what's the biggest difference? And I tell them that President Trump honored the Constitution. He let me do my job. And he let me keep my people free. Now, leadership on the state level, it matters too. It certainly mattered in South Dakota. I am so proud to say that South Dakota's strong economy has been a beacon of freedom for America. Most of you probably first heard about me during COVID, didn't you? Because South Dakota was the only state in the country that stayed open for business. We didn't mandate anything. We never ordered a single business or a church to close. I never even defined what an essential business was, because I don't believe that the government has the authority to tell you that your business isn't essential. When other states were pushing mandates and lockdowns, instead in South Dakota, we hit the gas. We embraced liberty. We told our story and we invited people to come and to enjoy our beautiful state. Now, all of the things that conservatives have always talked about, we just did it, and it worked. Our economy took off, and since I've been governor, we broke the national record for the lowest unemployment rate in American history at 1.8%. In South Dakota, everybody works. We paid off state debts and bonds. We fixed dams and bridges. We built roads. We have a fully funded pension plan and a AAA credit rating. We broke records for surpluses, and we balance our budget every single year. And last year in South Dakota, we passed the largest tax cut in South Dakota history. Under my administration, incomes in our state have gone up 36%. Women-owned businesses are thriving. We also have the highest birth rate in the nation. People are having babies because they're happy. And in South Dakota, we love babies. Our mental health challenges have gone down, our suicide rates are declining, and we are the #1 state in the country for a decline in overdoses because people have hope. We're growing so fast that we needed more workers to catch up. So we launched the most successful workforce recruitment campaign in the history of South Dakota. And they have come by the thousands to join us and to live with us. Do you guys remember those ads when I was a really lousy plumber and a really terrible electrician? Do you remember those? Well, since we started those ads, we have seen a 78% increase in licensed plumbers in the state of South Dakota. We've seen a 44% increase in electricians in our state. Now, people aren't moving to South Dakota for our beaches or for our beautiful January weather. They are moving to our state for opportunity and for freedom. And all of this happened because our people were bold. We took action, and I was strong. Now, South Dakota proved that freedom will make America wealthy again. And with President Trump in the White House, with Senator J.D. Vance by his side, we will prove it across America. Listen, 2 days ago, the whole world changed. Evil displayed itself in the very worst way, through a cowardly act. An innocent American lost his life, and we will continue to lift his family up in our prayers every single day. Prior to this week, we already knew that President Donald Trump was a fighter. He is the toughest man that I have ever met. Nobody has endured more than what he has gone through. They've attacked his reputation, they impeached him, they tried to bankrupt him, and they unjustly prosecuted him. But even in the most perilous moment this week, his instinct was to stand and to fight. Donald J. Trump is our man in the arena. He will never stop fighting for us. He will never stop, and now he is bringing all of us together. Now, I know that many of you are angry, but now is the time to unite. And we have to get to work. We have to win the hearts and minds of every single American. Wake them up with truth and with wisdom. We need to listen to them. You can't win people over by arguing with them. Visit with your neighbors, at your job, at your church, at the gas station, or even at the grocery store. Listen, there are moments in our history, often after great hardship and tragedy, when true leaders unite our country. At one time, President Lincoln, he united our country. He delivered my favorite presidential address of all time. In fact, it's the only speech or poem or song that I ever made my kids memorize when they were young, when they were little. It was the Gettysburg Address, and it was delivered during our nation's bloodiest conflict. That speech so inspired people that they continued to fight for years, and they lost loved ones in order to preserve this union we call the United States of America. Now, at that time, President Lincoln encouraged us to take increased devotion, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. Like Lincoln, in the midst of our pain and division, Donald Trump is calling us to be touched by the better angels of our nature. As Paul wrote in 2 Timothy, God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind. We must not be afraid. Even in our darkest days, we have never once given up hope. So don't quit on America. If we lose this country, where else will we go that provides more freedom and opportunity for our kids and our grandkids? And I've got 3 grandkids, and I'm counting on a whole lot more. And yes, democracy can be messy, but there is a great invisible strength to a people's union. We have shown the world that we can endure sacrifice and that we can still unite. We should still aspire to be worthy of this union, America. President Donald J. Trump is the leader we need for such a time as this. So now, I need you to get to work. Get out there, go do it. Don't quit. Keep fighting, keep uniting, keep talking to people, win the hearts and minds, and may God bless you, and may God continue to bless the great United States of America. Thank you.
Governor Kristi Noem of South Dakota, the first female governor of South Dakota, reelected in 2022 as that state's governor. Back with the panel here. Before she began speaking, John King reported that efforts are still underway behind the scenes to try to convince President Biden to step aside. He talked about Stanley Greenberg, a pollster among Democrats who's been sending very damaging polls to the White House, questions about whether or not it's actually being seen by the president. The president spoke to Lester Holt. I want to play an extended some piece of sound from that interview, which aired earlier. Let's play this.
Well, let's talk about the conversation this has started, and it's really about language, what we say out loud and the consequences of those. You called your opponent an existential threat. On a call a week ago, you said it's time to put Trump in the bullseye. There's some dispute about the context, but I think you appreciate that.
I didn't say crosshairs. I was talking about focus on. Look, the truth of the matter was, what I guess I was talking about at the time was, there's very little focus on Trump's agenda.
Yeah, the term was bullseye.
It was a mistake to use the word. I didn't say crosshairs. I meant bullseye. I meant focus on him. Focus on what he's doing. Focus on his policies. Focus on the number of lies he told in the debate. Focus. I mean, there's a whole range of things that, look, I'm not the guy that said I want to be a dictator on day one. I'm not the guy that refused to accept the outcome of the election. I'm not the guy who said that wouldn't accept the outcome of this election automatically. You can't only love your country when you win. And so the focus was on what he's saying, and I mean, the idea.
But have you taken a step back and done a little soul searching on things that you may have said that could incite people who are not balanced?
Well, I don't think, look, how do you talk about the threat to democracy, which is real, when a president says things like he says? Do you just not say anything because it may incite somebody? Look, I've not engaged in that rhetoric. Now, my opponent is engaged in that rhetoric. He talks about there'll be a bloodbath if he loses, talking about how he's going to forgive all those, actually, I guess, suspend the sentences of all those who were arrested and sentenced to go to jail because of what happened in the Capitol. I'm not out there making fun of, like, remember the picture of Donald Trump when Nancy Pelosi's husband was hit with a hammer, joking about it.
That's President Biden to Lester Holt. We'll be getting more clips from that interview. Scott Jennings, you're shaking your head.
This man's opponent just got his ear shot off, okay? And his instinct was to try to do some wordplay with the crosshairs bullseye thing, and then turned right around and uttered the lie about the dictator, which is a complete and total lie, and the lie about the bloodbath, which is a complete and total lie. I find this to be pathetic and small and partisan. I need the president to have an ounce of humility and introspection here. He is our leader. He's our leader, and he needs to simply say, I want to lower the temperature. I'll take responsibility for my part. We should all do that together. And he cannot do it. He can't do it.
I understand how upset you are, but I think if we try to do a split screen with all the times that Donald Trump has taken responsibility or apologized or for the things he said, we have a blank screen. I think we have a leadership crisis in this country. But if you're going to be mad about the crosshairs comment, which is the main comment, that there's 100 of them on your side. And so I agree with you. I wish he had done better. But I think for Democrats, when we hear this is somebody who at least will have the conversation. I haven't heard Trump yet have the conversation. If Trump comes out and meets your standard and says, I made the temperature too high and I'm going to take a step back, then I think you're going to be standing on strong ground. But until he does that, I don't know if you are.
Look, you also heard Biden say it was a mistake to use the word bullseye. I'm not sure I've ever heard Donald Trump say it was a mistake to say anything that he said. And I think that, listen, I hear your outrage. I think we are in a very fraught moment in this country. But I also wonder where this outrage was when Donald Trump was making fun of Paul Pelosi after somebody broke into his house with a hammer and tried to kill him. So I just think what you saw from Biden was an acknowledgement that language does have an impact. He said it was a mistake to use bullseye. And then I thought he went to what I think we're going to be grappling with for the rest of this campaign, which is this question of, How can you talk about things that do pose a real fundamental threat to our democracy without using language that incites people? And I think if I think if we can't have an honest conversation about that for the next 3.5 months, then we're going to wake up in November in a country we don't recognize.
I'll tell you one way we can have an honest conversation about it, by having an honest conversation about it, because the bloodbath, the dictator, so much of what the Biden campaign says about Donald Trump is just not
Those are
true.
all things he said,
In your parlance, these are cheap fakes. It's not real.
Those are, let's play the tape. I mean, those are all words that have come out of his mouth.
I'm going to split the baby on this. The idea that Donald Trump hasn't said provocative and incendiary things that, according to the standards that are being held against Joe Biden, don't also violate it, I just don't think is remotely defensible. 2 weeks before this, 2 weeks ago, he was retweeting or retruthing stuff about putting his political opponents on into military tribunals. He's encouraged mobs to be violent in his crowds. The thing is, I find most of this, I think the crosshairs debate, which I think he's not very effective on at all, misses the point. I have flashbacks to the Gabby Gifford stuff, where Joe Biden called Republicans in the House and the Senate, and this is 2011, terrorists. You had them called hostage takers. You had the Tea Party people from leading pundits and intellectuals and elected Democratic politicians saying that these people were all inciting violence, that Sarah Palin was responsible for Gabby Giffords being killed because she had crosshairs on a map. And it was nonsense. There was no proof of it. There's no proof that this guy was incited by anything the Democrats said. And so I think there's this weird standard now where the right is buying into the arguments that I thought were garbage when the left made them in 2011. There's no evidence that this guy was Jared Loughner, the guy who killed Gabby Giffords. It turned out that his core issue was that he was hearing voices that were telling him that we were abandoning our commitment to grammar. Yeah. It had nothing to do with any of this.
And obviously, we don't know anything about the motivation of this shooter. Kate, just in terms of John King's reporting on, Stanley Greenberg, a pollster, sending information to people within the inner circle, John raising questions about, is that information, and others raising questions, is that information getting to the president? Is it possible that it's not getting to the president?
Well, I think, is it possible that information is being filtered in a way to better favor the situation for Joe Biden? It's possible.
By the way, I just want to correct you. You said Gabby Giffords died. She obviously did not die.
Yes. I'm not there. Is it possible? Sure. I think, the Joe Biden I saw and the team around him provided him information, told him things he didn't want to hear. I obviously, again, I can't vouch for the conversations that are happening right now. I can speak to what it was like when I worked for him, which is to say we often had conversations with him that he didn't like.
What do you make, though, of this reporting that after that it's gone quiet because there's belief among some Democrats that it's not constructive to have a public discussion while the Republican convention is in session, but that if there's not movement, that it will become public again after the convention?
Yeah. That seems to be the case. I think there is enough discussion. I think there's enough anxiety about polls that continue to emerge that people are having these conversations. I think there is clearly agreement across the party, particularly after the horrific actions of this weekend, that this is not a moment to publicly look to be undermining the president of the United States. But yes, are these conversations happening in private? They very clearly are. And look, here's the thing. One way or the other, Democrats are going to run out of runway on this. And so there is going to have to be a reckoning. I personally believe that Joe Biden can make a case for why he should have a second term. I think if ultimately the information, the data shows that is not possible, you heard from the president himself, that if he believes it's not possible, he will look to step down. But one way or the other, Democrats are going to have to come to an agreement on this and start making the case against Donald Trump rather than against themselves.
I agree with you on that, and that's true. Right now, the party's just frozen. There's kind of a paralysis that's set in. We were, like the whole country, terrified when you saw Donald Trump fall down. And everybody took a big step back because that could have been the start of an actual civil war and also political violence in this country like we've never seen in our lifetime. So that was a big moment of being frozen. And then now, you've got the Republicans putting on their best case against us. And so in both situations, you're going to see quiet and some unity. But that disquiet is there behind the scenes, and I think it will reemerge. I do hope Democrats are watching this convention, because the one thing that I think will get us to get our act together is to look at the agenda that's being put forward here, which is an agenda that I find very troubling. They're trying to split black from brown. A lot of the African-American commentary was deliberately trying to turn us into an anti-immigrant bloc, which we have not been for the past 30 years. There's a lot of bad stuff happening in this convention that we need to be able to talk about. And I agree with you. We don't know how to talk about it now, because we don't want to add to the vitriol that might lead to violence, but we also don't want to be silent in the face of an agenda we're afraid of.
I want to check in with our Jeff Zeleny, who has some more reporting about President Biden. Jeff?
A shot at the American dream. But under Joe Biden's debilitating economic policies,
2.5 weeks now have continued privately, as John King was reporting earlier. Publicly, they have cooled, but talking to several officials, this is what they're adding on to that. The battleground map, quite frankly, has expanded. There are new worries with officials I'm talking to in campaigns that Minnesota, New Hampshire, New Mexico, even Virginia could possibly be at play. But right here, Anderson, in Wisconsin, talking to Wisconsin officials, they too are concerned about the standing and the state of President Biden's candidacy. Why Wisconsin? Why does that matter? Because there is no path to the White House. There is no re-election for President Biden without Wisconsin. It's the blue wall that he talks about so often, of course. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Even if he won those three, he would still need to win that one electoral vote in Nebraska if he did not win the other states. So the reason the math matters, the reason the battlegrounds matter, they are concerned that there's an increasingly narrow path. But talking to a Wisconsin official, they are sounding the alarm here and wondering if there should be more public conversation. But ironically, here in this hall, as we've been listening to, the Republican criticism of President Biden is extraordinary, but they want him to stay on the ticket. They think he's the easiest to beat. Anderson?
Jeff Zeleny, thanks very much. Listen, is that what you're hearing as well among Republicans wanting Biden to stand?
Very much so. The Trump campaign has planned it around running against Joe Biden. Donald Trump is beating him outside of the margin of error in key swing states. They are preparing for if it's Vice President Harris. I think that they realize that that's an option that they would be prepared for, but she now is performing better head-to-head against Donald Trump than Joe Biden is.
By the way, I was watching President Biden on the runway in Las Vegas.
And I think that fundamentally, honestly, I think the fact that J.D. Vance was chosen as the vice presidential pick signals a strength and a confidence in the Trump campaign. If they thought this was going to be a squeaker, they would put somebody who they thought was going to get them more votes that they needed, but they're feeling so confident, they went with a legacy pick who's going to keep his policies in place.
Based on what I am seeing from the rest of this Holt interview that's now coming in while we're sitting here, I'm starting to become convinced that the people around Joe Biden who want him to move on are the ones who are advocating, like, oh, we got to do more. Let's do more. Let's do more. All of these appearances, his appearances before the country, he's spoken to the country 3 times, now 4 times if you count Lester Holt since the shooting. The interview with Stephanopoulos. I mean, remember, he won this election in 2020 by never leaving his basement. And now you've got all these people saying, let's go out, let's go out, let's go out. He's hurting himself every time. Now, this question about whether he should stay in the race or not, I agree with Alyssa. I mean, Republicans are desperate to keep Biden in the race because they think he's the weakest, but also because you can sense it in the hall. They sense vindication is at hand. This is why they love Trump in the primary, despite all the arguments made against him. They want the satisfaction of Donald Trump beating Joe Biden in the national popular vote in November, and they think he can do it, and that he is on his way to do it.
Tom Friedman wrote a very powerful piece about this, and he said, if you ask what your worst enemy wants you to do, you should probably do the opposite. Biden's worst enemies want him to stay in the race. That might be a reason for him to think about doing the opposite.
This convention crowd likely to get revved up very soon as we expect Donald Trump to come to the arena. And coming up on stage, entertainer and activist Amber Rose. You're watching the Republican National Convention live on CNN.
Today, we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
The mothers are not getting nutrition.
How many meals per day can you eat? My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
President Zelensky, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much. The democracy will win if we fight for it.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
And that's what we are. Women, mothers, daughters, sisters are superheroes. You are a Muslim woman. And as a Muslim woman, this is not Islam.
It's crucial we make sense of what's happening. How can your country say it's lost nothing?
You can ask either the president or his spokesman.
And fully understand what's at stake. Wait a minute. Is Ukraine failing?
No, we are not failing. We are moving forward.
We're calling this the reunion of the peacemakers.
Thank you.
Amanpour, tonight on CNN.
Join me, Larry Madowo, as I introduce you to Africa's trendsetters. See how they use their talent, resources, and passion to make a difference on the continent. This is African Voices Changemakers.
From studio to the stage, two revolutionary musicians use the power of jazz to create global change.
Jazz music is the music of freedom, is the music of liberation, is the music of our people.
African Voices Changemakers on CNN, in association with Glow.
We could learn so much if we barely scratch the surface.
Neurotech is much bigger than artificial intelligence, by a long shot.
That's extraordinary. How did that feel?
Felt awesome because I felt like a Jedi.
Join me as I decode brain-computer interface.
Decoded, Sunday on CNN.
To me, the next frontier is to realize sustainable, high-speed and convenient transport of passengers and goods.
One solution that's certainly gotten a lot of hype over the last decade is the Hyperloop. The proposed train in a tube is looking to upend the way we travel. With speeds up to 1,000 kilometers per hour, it could zoom across an entire continent in just a few hours. Netherlands-based Hart Hyperloop is aiming to bring this high-speed technology to life.
Our vision is to create a world where distance doesn't matter, where it's possible for you to be much more free in where you live, work, and how you travel, to really shrink the world for people to live in.
I'm Bill Weir on the California coast, and this is CNN.
I'm David. Good evening, America. I'm David Sachs.
David Sachs is speaking right now, the founder and CEO of the social media site Yammer, born in South Africa, podcaster. Let's listen in.
The same opportunities won't be there for future generations. As I look out at this convention, I see a party that is strong and unified behind President Donald J. Trump and his pick for Vice President, Senator J.D. Vance. And what about the Democrats? They're in disarray after shielding President Biden from a vigorous primary and gaslighting the entire country about his fitness to serve. We still don't know which puppet Democrat Party bosses will install as their nominee, but we know what their agenda will be. 4 more years of chaos and failure, both at home and abroad. In my hometown of San Francisco, Democrat rule has turned the streets of our beautiful city into a cesspool of crime, homeless encampments, and open drug use. Democrats, led by border czar Kamala Harris, have allowed millions of illegal migrants to invade our country. They tasked Homeland Security not with stopping the illegal aliens, but with busing them all over our country. Democrats have recklessly spent trillions of dollars of wasteful and unnecessary government programs, setting off the worst inflation since Jimmy Carter. But worst of all, the Biden-Harris administration has taken a world that was at peace under President Trump, and they lit it on fire. First, President Biden botched the Afghanistan withdrawal, displaying incompetence and weakness for the whole world to see. Then, he provoked the Russians to invade Ukraine with talk of NATO expansion. Afterward, he rejected every opportunity for peace in Ukraine, including a deal to end the war just 2 months after it broke out. Now the war is deep into its third year, with no end in sight. Hundreds of thousands of people are dead. Hundreds of billions of our taxpayer dollars have gone up in smoke. President Biden sold us this new forever war by promising it would weaken Russia and strengthen America. Well, how does that look today? Russia's military is bigger than before, while our own stockpiles are dangerously depleted. Every day, there are new calls for escalation, and the world looks on in horror as Joe Biden's demented policy takes us to the brink of World War III. In the Middle East, America is now losing a war with the Houthis. And the administration's policy towards Gaza has been so incoherent that the only thing that pro-Israel and pro-Palestine protesters agree on is the chant, F Joe Biden. Rather than bolstering confidence in American leadership, as he promised, President Biden has become the symbol of an America in decline. This may be our present, but it does not have to be our future. We can replace the Biden-Harris cabal with a president who is strong and smart rather than sleepy and senile. Or, in her case, clueless and embarrassing. A president who understands that you build the most powerful military in the world to keep America safe, not to play the world's policeman.
All right, that's David Sachs, the founder and CEO of Yammer, giving a message focused a lot on foreign policy. Casey Hunt, some interesting language in that speech. Senile, sleepy, demented, a reference to chants of F Joe Biden, certainly not in keeping with the unity, American unity theme we were told. In any case, we have a new clip of President Biden's interview with Lester Holt earlier tonight, in which he was asked about the polling, suggesting what John and David and others have been discussing earlier about the unlikelihood of his reelection, according to polls. Let's just run that clip, and then I want to get your reaction.
If you look at all the polling data shows a lot of different things, but there's no wide gap between us. It's essentially a toss-up race. And I think one of the arguments that get made, You have the most successful presidency of any president in modern history, maybe since Franklin Roosevelt. Passed more major legislation no one thought could get done. We're able to put together consensus. We're able to unite NATO. We're able to deal in foreign policy. Why don't you just decide to rest on those laurels? And the answer is because the job's not finished.
Do you feel like you've weathered the storm on this issue of whether you should be on the ticket or not?
Look, 14 million people voted for me to be the nominee in the Democratic Party. Okay? I listen to them.
So it does not sound as though he is getting the message that Democratic pollsters have been delivering if he thinks this is still a toss-up race.
No, and that frame is the one that you've heard him use a couple of times here, where he talks about the voters as opposed to the elites, is what he was trying to say in a previous interview to be pushed out. And he says there, while the polls show this as a tight race, if you read national polling, it is true that the movement is rather slight. But in the battleground states where this election is going to be decided, it is not. I mean, Chris was saying earlier that and this is true from the Democrats I'm talking to, they're looking at states that have no business being on the map under normal circumstances, including Minnesota, Virginia, New Hampshire is one that has really been a bellwether in the past.
And they're looking at this. The president's approval rating is in the mid-30s, a high of 38, low as 36 in recent polls. We can go back 10 presidents to Dwight Eisenhower. Okay, here are the other presidents that have had about that in their approval rating at this point of their re-election term. Jimmy Carter, George H.W. Bush, and Donald Trump. What do those three have in common?
One-term presidents.
David?
Yeah, look, first of all, let's just reality check here. If a Democrat is a couple of points behind on Election Day, they're losing all the battleground states. Democrats have to have a significant lead. Remember, Joe Biden won by almost 4 points in 2020, 7 million nationally, and it ended up being decided by 45,000 votes in the battleground states. He's just not connecting with the reality of the situation. And, look, the president wants recognition for what I think has been a lot of really great accomplishments. He wants his place in history, but this isn't about that. And when you say, well, people are worried about the future and how you'll perform in the future, he says, well, look at the last 3.5 years. And I keep saying the same thing, and I think I said this to you. Tom Brady won a Super Bowl 3 years ago. He's not in football anymore. Why? Because age is an immutable force, and he can't play the way he played before. Doesn't mean he wasn't a great quarterback. There's so much that the president just has to come to grips with here because, right now, the high likelihood, and Chris, I think you referred to this before, the higher likelihood, much higher, is that he will lose by a landslide than that he will win 270 electoral votes. That is the reality.
And also,
Casey, I want to come to you but I want to show one other clip because the truth of the matter is that these were concerns that voters had about President Biden long before the debate 3 weeks not even 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks and 2 weeks.
It's been a year in the last
any case, but the polls over and over suggested that voters, including Democrats, thought that President Biden was too old and not able to do the job. It was only because of his performance at the debate that the elites woke up to it. This is not an elite. This is not an elite-driven discussion. The voters were there, and the elites were late to it. The Democratic officials. President Biden was asked about debates and whether or not he would perform in another debate. Let's take a listen to that clip.
I'm going to debate him when we agreed to debate, and I'm going to debate him in September.
But if the opportunity came up to do one between now and then, is there a sense of wanting to get back on the horse?
I'm on the horse. Where have you been? I've done 22 major events, met thousands of people, overwhelming crowds, a lot happening. I'm on the horse. What I'm doing is going out and demonstrating to the American people that I have command of all my faculties, that I don't need notes, I don't need teleprompter. I can go out and answer any questions at all. And I stood there when NATO was in town. I stood there for an hour and answered questions.
Casey.
You can see there some of the flashes of anger and defensive that are frequently reported to be much more amplified than that in private, and that I think kind of underscore the conundrum that many Democrats are in because you have a president who is so dug in. And when you layer the events of the last 48 hours that it's been since this unfolded, the Democrats that I am talking to, both who work for Democrats, who've committed their lives to trying to get Democrats elected, but also sort of rank and file people in my own life or my sort of expanded circles, there is a sense of despair setting in right now among people that Democrats really need to work extremely hard for the president if they want to win and to get out and vote. And they looked at what happened on Saturday, and they are saying between the debate stage and the rally around Trump that has, justifiably followed that attempt, that there is very little hope for them right now.
For all the talk about, and there seems to be a bash Biden session going on here, I hold the Democratic Party much more responsible than Joe Biden. Yes, Biden is stuck in and digging in, but having said that, I go back to 1968 and when the Democratic Party turned on Lyndon Johnson and really pushed him and almost forced him to get out, and on March 31st of 1968, he did get out as the running for re-election. If the Democratic Party really wanted to put the wood to Joe Biden, they could do it. Hakeem Jeffries, I know people say, well, you don't do it in public. If it doesn't work in private, do it in public. Hakeem Jeffries hasn't called for him to leave. Chuck Schumer hasn't called for him to leave. Last thing I heard, he said, I'm with Joe. Nancy Pelosi said, well, that's not a final decision.
Yeah, but Chris,
the party could be going much harder at Joe Biden than they are.
Can I just finish your history lesson? And I think this is where you were going. 1968, March of that year, LBJ got out, and the Democratic convention in Chicago was a mess. And who won the presidency?
Yeah,
Not
but
the
we should.
in the middle of Vietnam.
Not
That's
the
a very
Democrats.
different
I just want to
Okay.
interrupt. I just want to interrupt for 1 second because Charlie Kirk is speaking right now. He's the head of a right-wing student group called Turning Points, and I just want to point it out because this is something that the Republican Party has an issue with, and they do not reckon with it. The Democratic Party has its own issue, and that is Charlie Kirk and Turning Points USA has been accused credibly by other conservatives of having an anti-Semitism problem within its ranks. Eric Erickson wrote in a post that Turning Point USA was looking like not just a grifting operation, but an anti-Semitic grifting operation. Ben Domenech, a co-founder of the Federalist, wrote, if Charlie Kirk remains the head of TPUSA, the right has an anti-Semite problem that will follow them into the coming elections. Now, obviously, there have been a lot of issues with anti-Semitism on the left that we've seen explode since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th. This is the second speaker this evening who has said things that are blatantly anti-Semitic. The lieutenant governor of North Carolina was the first. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot Marjorie Taylor Greene. There have been three. And this is a problem. In party politics, we're going to do this again if the Democrats put up people like this in August. But this is a problem, and I think that it's beholden on us to call it out and point it out.
Yeah, it's anti-Semitism. And it's more broadly just he swims in oceans of conspiracies. And it really is noteworthy that at 9:45,
this is prime time slot.
On the first night of this convention, that he is getting this kind of platform. And it does speak, and David Urban, I mean, you can talk about this, but it does speak to the fact that the Republican Party isn't just about being embellished by Donald Trump. The Republican Party has to deal with people like Charlie Kirk who have giant megaphones and very, very big followings, especially among young people. I mean, that is what he's trying to do. He's trying to get young people, and he's doing it with a lot of tropes and a lot of things that are just flat wrong.
And again, I'm quoting two conservatives because I'm quite certain that the response will be CNN is blah, blah, blah. It is Eric Erickson and Ben Domenech who accused Charlie Kirk of anti-Semitism, and I'm just saying this is an issue. Again, the Democrats have their own issue too with this. But this is an issue on the right.
Yes, listen, I'm not familiar with the exact issue with the anti-Semitism that Charlie Kirk is espoused, but I can assure you, right, that Donald Trump with Jewish grandchildren, if he was made aware of it, would kind of swat it down. I can assure you that Donald Trump adores his kids, grandchildren, more than he adores Charlie Kirk and whatever anti-Semitic remarks that he has made or may have made in the past. I don't know. And listen, I'd widely condemn it. We could do better. I think that you're talking about prime time. We should have somebody better on perhaps than Charlie Kirk. I'm sure there are people that you could address younger crowd than Charlie Kirk. Turning Point USA started out really robustly, and I think may have
principal promoter of J.D. Vance.
Charlie Kirk was?
Yes.
Well,
wrong.
And you see Trump in front of a lot of Turning Point USA pipe and drape because they host events and Trump shows up.
Yeah, well, but again, I'm not making an exception. I'm not trying to make an excuse for Charlie Kirk or anti-Semitism, but they do turn out a lot of kids.
Yep.
And I'm not sure what the remarks are, but I would.
Well, there's a New York Times story I'll send to you in 1 second. It just published a few hours ago. Caitlin Collins is on the floor with news. Caitlin?
Hi, Jake. Yes, I am now a little bit higher off the floor right now, and I can tell you that we are told that former President Donald Trump is now in the building here in Milwaukee. Of course, this is the first time that he has been over here on the day one of the Republican convention. He got here last night. He had dinner with donors, and then, of course, today we saw him make that vice presidential pick in J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio. We do expect to see the two of them together, which will be the first time that we have seen them. That is the family box that you're looking at right now. House Speaker Mike Johnson is in it. Congressman Byron Donalds. We do expect other VIPs to be in there. Senator Katie Britt and her husband up in the top left of that box. We do expect to see all of them in that box coming in. We expect the entire family to come in together. There's a ring of supporters waiting for them to come in, and it will be the first moment that we see the two of them together since Trump announced his pick. A pick, of course, Jake, that he was waffling over even as of this morning, weighing the pros and cons. And of course, Jake, the other thing to think about, based on what you were just talking about, Charlie Kirk getting a primetime speaking spot here, looking at the other speakers, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Kristi Noem, not always people that you would expect to see in these primetime spots at a party's convention. It just shows you this really is Donald Trump's party now. I know we know that, but we haven't really seen it on display at a Republican convention ever, because in 2016, that floor was quite contested. There were a lot of Cruz delegates down there and people who wanted someone else at the top of the ticket. In 2020, we were at the South Lawn of the White House doing that convention. This is the first time we've seen a convention truly in the mold of Donald Trump.
That's right, Caitlin. Let's throw it over to Anderson. Anderson?
Jake, thanks very much. As we continue to watch the convention, what do you anticipate Donald Trump, he's not going to be speaking tonight, obviously. This is just sort of him appearing to build up excitement.
Absolutely. I mean, let's look at the way he rolled out the VP today. I mean, this whole thing has the touches of Donald Trump, the showman, right? And the platform has the touches of Donald Trump's agenda. The speakers have the touches of Donald Trump's remade Republican Party. So to me, it's just sort of putting an imprint on the story here, which is this party has been remade in Donald Trump's image from top to bottom, and he's enjoying it, and he's building an entire week around that theory.
I think there are two things happening. One is, he's certainly a great showman. He's also alive.
Yeah.
He's also alive. And that's a big deal. I think that's a very big deal. I think when he comes out, even people who don't like Donald Trump very much, even people who hope that he never gets near the White House again, are going to feel some emotions they're going to be surprised by, because he's alive. And I hope that people will open their hearts a little bit to understand, I don't want him in the White House, but I don't want him in the hospital either. I don't want him in the White House. I don't want him in the cemetery. I want him to be defeated the right way and sent back to Florida. And the fact that he's alive tonight is going to be a big deal for this crowd and for the country.
The timing's interesting to me. I mean, it's going to be a huge moment. The room is going to be on its feet. You're going to feel the energy. And I think people watching at home are going to be glad to see him, to your point, alive and well. I'm curious to see who's going to be on stage, because he's not going to give remarks. It seems like he's going to most likely be in the box. He may be up there when Amber Rose, this entrepreneur, entertainer kind of figure, is there. It's an interesting moment. I probably would have sequenced it with an elected official praising him up there. But these are the details that, listen, all the focus in the room is going to be on Donald Trump, his family, and the Vances.
I don't quite get the timing of it either, insofar as he was still getting a lot of goodwill. He was freezing the Democrats like deers in the headlights. And he did the VP announcement tonight, which kind of took the issue away from Trump. And he could have had this night all to his own. I mean, maybe there's some logistical or legal reason that you had to get the VP thing out there. But you would have had two surprises over 2 nights if he had day one, I'm alive, they can't kill me.
Yeah,
day two, J.D. Vance.
Do you think it was a mistake to have Charlie Kirk speak? I mean, to Jake's point?
I think it's a mistake to have Charlie Kirk speak anywhere at any time.
Whoa.
I think talking to Charlie Kirk and listening to him is one of the fastest ways to burn off IQ points. I think Charlie Kirk is a grifter and a fraud. The anti-Semitism stuff is a fair accusation against him, but the bigger problem with Charlie Kirk is he's profoundly dumb. And when you don't know anything about how the world works, you think everything is a conspiracy theory. Anti-Semitism is the oldest conspiracy theory out there. It's why they used to call it the socialism of fools. But he's also the guy who co-founded the Falkirk Center for Jesus stuff at Liberty University with a guy who had some interesting relations with his pool boy. He's gotten very, very rich off of a lot of gullible parents who want their kids to be like what they think Charlie Kirk is like. And he's been incredibly damaging to the conservative movement in the Republican Party.
We expect Donald Trump to enter the hall at any time. Our coverage continues after a quick break.
IRS agents and say, "You're fired, Donald Trump."
The more matches you own, the more games you own, the more you're in a league of your own. You're not only one step closer to owning this and this. You're one step closer to owning the future.
We're starting our descent into Surmajet International Airport.
And being remembered forever.
This is CNN.
Could 1 hour change how you see the world?
We made it to the bottom of the world.
Every Monday, CNN's best journalists tell the whole story.
That's the risk they take every night.
Stories that deserve more time.
Hello, people.
And more angles.
How do you deal with the loss? I have to find my son.
Heading east was the only way to try to get out. Immerse yourself in deeper storytelling. The Whole Story with Anderson Cooper. Monday on CNN.
I'm Richard Quest. I love traveling the world. Broaden the mind, open the heart, and I'm not done yet. It's time to embrace new adventures. They say Cleopatra's buried here. Find the fun and seize the moments in this world of wonder. So now I'm ready. 1,700 meters.
Oh my goodness!
Saturday on CNN in association with Turkish Airlines.
I'm Melissa Bell in Paris, and this is CNN.
This is CNN special live coverage of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Donald Trump in the building, expected to enter the hall at any moment. I want to go to Phil Mattingly, who's standing by. Phil, what can you tell us?
Well, all eyes have been on the stage for much of the night. Right now, they're turning to the back of the room in the VIP section, where we have started to see Trump family members start to walk in, including Don Jr. and his girlfriend, Kimberly Guilfoyle. They have joined J.D. Vance, who is already standing there with the speaker, Mike Johnson, Mike Johnson's wife, Kelly, Byron Donalds, another House member as well. Tiffany Trump has also walked in. You see the family, friends, close advisors, including Dan Scavino from the Trump team, Alina Habba, Trump's lawyer, is also here as well. There's Eric Trump sitting with his wife, Laura Trump, who is now heading the Republican National Committee. You should also note Tucker Carlson walked into the VIP section just a short while ago, really kind of setting the stage for what we expect in short order will be the former president himself walking in, really the first time other than coming off of an airplane we have seen him since the assassination attempt, and you can hear the crowd now, everybody paying very close attention, Anderson, to this VIP section, and now you can see the former president on the Jumbotron as the anticipation is starting to mount. There was no explicit guarantee he was going to be here tonight. You see the bandage on his ear. We're waiting for him to walk out for a major entrance on the day that he named his potential vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance. The unification of the Republican Party, not even in question before this, certainly the case now, Jake.
All right, Phil Mattingly, thanks so much. We're seeing the VIP section of President Trump's box fill up, and we just saw a clip of President Trump, obviously there behind the scenes, ready to come out. President Trump with a big bandage on his right ear, which was obviously he was obviously wounded in the assassination attempt. The crowd cheering when they see the images of him on the Jumbotron with the bandage on his ear from that horrible event in Butler, Pennsylvania. But the crowd really excited, people standing up, everybody's phone is out to film it, though I'm sure there will be better video they can get at home. But back to go to the VIP section, we saw Tucker Carlson, J.D. Vance, who is now the vice presidential nominee, Congressman Byron Donalds, members of the Trump family, Donald Trump Jr., Tiffany Trump, and others. I think I see Laura Trump, Kristi Noem perhaps, Eric Trump I see. People getting ready for this. Now, this is not the big night for Trump. The big night for Trump will be Thursday when he accepts the nomination. But this obviously a big moment for him as he comes before the crowd. The crowd that it was already excited to see him, but certainly it's taking on more love and excitement because of what happened on Saturday.
And you can hear everybody. The crowd is roaring.
Right.
President of the United States. Prayer works. This nation based on faith. Prayer works. Because he was sure, as Donald Trump turned his head just slightly, that the bullet missed him just enough to save his life to be the next president of the United States. We have believed for so long that God will make some changes in this country. And he's about to make a change in the current administration and send them home. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Tonight, we make the decision on what's right for America. More prosperity, less gas prices, less food prices, help for our veterans, and God bless our military wherever they are in this United States and abroad. There would be no wars.
Ladies
there wasn't
and gentlemen,
any when President Trump
please
was president.
welcome the next president of the United States, Donald J. Trump.
If tomorrow all the things were gone, I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again, just my children and my wife. Thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. Today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. Sing it! God bless the USA. We are here tonight with one purpose, and that is to elect Donald J. Trump as the next president of the United States. He is here tonight to show his courage, his defiance against somebody who tried to kill him. You will not take this man down. He has the courage, the strength, and he will be the next president of the United States. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea. Ladies and gentlemen, the 45th President of the United States and soon to be the 47th President of the United States, please welcome Donald J. Trump. Today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. Oh, and I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I to you and defend her still today, 'cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA. Mr. President.
Please welcome Mark Lawrence from Cedar Springs, Michigan.
An obviously emotional Donald Trump greeting a crowd, and they're chanting "Fight, fight," which is what he said right after the attempted assassination attempt. And you can see the emotion on his face. It looks like possibly even tears on his face. This crowd joyfully welcoming him back after the horrible events over the weekend. Viva Trump, they're saying now. Oh, we love Trump. I'm sorry. I was having a flashback to the 2000 convention. We love Trump, they're saying. We love Trump. Chris.
Winston Churchill famously said, "Nothing in life is so exhilarating as to be shot at without effect." And you could see that today. The idea that just hours ago, a few days ago, this man, an assassin's bullet whizzed by him, hit him in the ear, inches from his temple. It'd be just by the slightest fraction of an inch. He survived, shot at without effect, and you can see the joy of this crowd. I got to tell you, somebody who's been covering these conventions since 1964, that may have been the most electric moment I ever saw. That was quite extraordinary. You whether you like the man or not, that was.
Well, I mean, this is a crowd. These are tens of thousands of people who love Donald Trump, and they almost lost him. This figure that figures so prominently in their lives.
And it's so interesting tonight. There has been zero talk about the Democrats and rhetoric and political rhetoric and blaming the media, and it's all been talk about divine providence, a miracle, and I think that's what most of these people view, is that it is by the grace of God that Donald Trump is here tonight and representing them going forward.
I mean, we're go ahead, Abby.
There's always been with Trump an almost messianic quality to his following, and we typically see that at his campaign rallies. I've been to many of them. They feel a little bit like this. It's not as common to see these sort of party official events have that same kind of feel. And it's just reflective of how far Trump has come in his command of his own party. And even between Saturday and today, this room feels different because of what happened Saturday, as we've been saying. And you cannot underestimate on the enthusiasm scale. You know, there are Trump's really extreme supporters, but I'm hearing from people who are kind of mediocre about Trump going into this, who feel a sense of relief and a sense of appreciation for him that is reflected in this room. I mean, there are probably a lot of people in this room who maybe they wanted somebody else, but overwhelmingly, I think he has brought people over into a place where it used to be only his most fervent supporters were, and that is the big change, and that is going to matter.
And the other thing, too, and Jake, you touched on this when you talked about his reaction. He, sitting in this family box next to, we should note, Tucker Carlson, Mike Johnson, J.D. Vance, he seems like a different man than the person that we often see at the podium at rallies. I mean, he is subdued. I mean, seeing that bandage on his ear, it's very striking.
I did not. The one place where I would depart from you, Chris, is he does not look exhilarated to me. He looks very, very subdued.
The fist isn't
which
in the
is
air.
another way you might react to having almost lost your life. But it is, I think.
Don't blame me. Blame Winston Churchill.
Yes. He wasn't around for this one. But I just, it'll be interesting to see. He said he's rewriting his speech for Thursday.
Listen, I think he's grateful. He's grateful to be alive. He called Selena. I talked to Selena a couple times. He called her
Selena
several
Zito, a reporter from Western Pennsylvania.
And so he called her several times to check in on her to see how she was doing. He was so taken aback by the incident and was talking to her about it. And she eventually said, "Hey, can we write this down?" But he reached out to her and said, "Listen, I want to make sure you're okay. I feel badly about your daughter. I feel badly about what happened." I mean, you cannot get shot in the head and not be affected.
Listen, look at him there. The smile on his face, the sort of response. It's just
gratitude.
I mean, it's remarkable to take it in. Sorry, Dana.
No, that's okay. We're right above this VIP box, so we actually witnessed with our own eyes the former president come in. And I think you're all right. There was an exhilaration in the room while he was subdued, and it was I think that's part of what made that moment so striking. And Chris, I don't go back as far as you go. I would say about 24 years of covering conventions, and I haven't covered it. Nope, none of us has covered a convention, obviously, with this kind of almost tragedy, and it was a tragedy. Somebody lost their life on Saturday, but with this kind of, frankly, hero's welcome, which Donald Trump gets in any case when he walks into a room of supporters, particularly a convention. But in the light of what happened on Saturday, it's almost hard to describe.
Well, he's been through a trauma.
The way it felt in this room.
He's been through a traumatic event. He almost lost his life. Somebody was killed, an innocent man in the audience whose only crime was going to a Trump rally. Obviously, he should have had the right to enjoy that. Two other individuals from Pennsylvania in critical condition. A horrible, horrible event. And he's been through a traumatic event, and that's going to have an effect on people on an emotional level. How much that actually changes him. Obviously, people get changed from near-death experiences. How much that actually changes him as a politician or as a presidential candidate, we will see. But obviously, it has had an impact.
Jake, to Dana's point, they feel that Donald Trump took a bullet for them, right? That he's out campaigning, he took a bullet for them, was standing in the way and got hit and took a bullet for them. And you could feel that in this room.
Well, there's a
saying. Let's go. I'm sorry to interrupt. Let's go to Caitlin Collins, who's on the floor with the governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum.
Yeah, Jake, I've got Governor Doug Burgum here with me. We're sitting right off the floor, obviously watching this entrance, watching those in the box with former President Donald Trump. Thank you, Governor, for being here. What is it like for you to see former President Trump walk in with that large white bandage on his ear? Just obviously so markedly different from since Saturday night.
Well, I think like a lot of Americans tonight, we're sitting here just in awe of a man that's got the strength and the perseverance and the courage. I mean, he's literally the picture of that. With him coming off the stage in Pennsylvania with his fist in the air, that's going to be in kids' school books 100 years from now as a defining moment in history. But I think all of us also feel just a tremendous amount of gratitude because, as was said on this show, I mean, divine providence. I mean, we're a millimeter away from right now having a country and a party being in chaos and in mourning for something that would, mark an era just the way the JFK assassination did in the 1960s. So we missed that by a millimeter, and now history's on a different path. And I think President Trump, not only he's uniting this party, but I think he actually, the language he's used in Saturday is talking about uniting the country, rewriting the speech for Thursday night about uniting the country. I know people haven't seen him that way, but when people go through a near-death experience, I think that these things can change people.
Do you think it's changed him?
Well, I think you saw him tonight walking in and listening to Lee Greenwood sing a song that he stood on the stage many, many times, but I think he certainly has to have an understanding and gratitude that, A, he's alive. He said that to all the people around him. He's lucky to be alive.
Yeah, and he's sitting in that box. When something like Saturday happens, it makes you realize how consequential a vice presidential pick, not that it always isn't, but how it is. He's sitting next to Ohio Senator J.D. Vance. Obviously, you were also one of the finalists to be picked for vice president. How did you get the news today that you were not going to be the pick?
Well, I got a call and a great conversation with the president, and he's and he said, "Hey, Mr. Secretary," he's always been so positive and so considerate to Catherine and I this whole time. But as you know, Caitlin, we were never running for a cabinet position, never running to be VP. As a sitting governor, and I've got 152 days left of the greatest job in the nation, being governor of North Dakota right now. That was our focus because another 4 years of Joe Biden for a state that produces natural resources and agriculture, the inflation that's affecting every one of our citizens, affecting everybody in America, the open borders affecting everyone in America. So Donald Trump's policies actually do lift up not just independents and Republicans, but Democrats as well. And I think this week is going to be a chance for people across the country to hear that.
So he called you Mr. Secretary. I mean, that sounds like he's teasing that he would want you in his cabinet. You told me previously that you were not open to taking a cabinet position. Is that still the case?
Well, there's going to be no cabinet positions that President Trump can get out unless he wins. And this is going to be a tight race for sure this fall. I mean, people may feel like it's a runaway today, but these things always tighten up. And I would just say there's going to be a lot of work to do between now and then, and that's going to be the focus. Any time that I'm spending now is my governing job in North Dakota and making sure that President Trump ends up back in the White House.
So you're saying don't take it for granted. It's not clear what's going to happen in this election. What do you think Donald Trump needs to do out on the campaign trail? If you were his running mate, what would your advice be over, because you and Senator Vance had very different reactions to what happened on Saturday. You were more in the camp of talking about unity and taking the temperature down. One of Senator Vance's initial posts within hours of the shooting was blaming President Biden and his rhetoric, even though there's no motive determined by the FBI yet. Which tack do you think Donald Trump should follow?
Well, I think President Trump himself has been talking about unity. It's been peace, unity, make America great again. He's added those words to even what he's putting out on his post right now, and I think that's the right message for us going forward. And I think with J.D. Vance, I mean, he's a small town guy like me. What's not to love about someone who grew up in a small town? And this election is going to be determined by that blue wall up north. And with him having Ohio, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania in his backyard, I think he's a solid pick for the Trump-Vance ticket to have a sweep this fall.
Yeah, a lot of rivalries between Pennsylvania and Ohio, but we'll see what that looks like. Governor Burgum, thank you for joining us. I know it's been a very chaotic and busy day for you, so thank you for your time.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Anderson, obviously hearing from Governor Burgum for the first time since learning the vice presidential pick earlier today.
Yeah, Caitlin, thanks very much. Extraordinary to see the former president really the first time since we last saw him on that stage.
Yeah, he looked emotional to me. He looked humble. I mean, he had an interesting sort of look on his face, like he was soaking in all the United Republicans there. Can't really imagine what it's like to be in his position. I read today, he said, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be dead. And so from that point forward, when you sort of internalize that, every day is a gift. And to me, his facial expression, his body language showed a different kind of Donald Trump than we're used to seeing.
He's listening to Amber Rose right now. Let's listen in.
And that's when it hit me. These are my people. This is where I belong. So I let go of my fear of judgment, of being misunderstood, of getting attacked by the left, and I put the red hat on too. Thank you. Love you too. I never felt more free and more love for my country than I do now. I want to thank my father, who's in the audience tonight, for opening my eyes. He served over 20 years in the U.S. military. Thank you for your service, Dad. Where's he at? I love you, Dad. I love you. I love you so much. Thank you. When I met the president and Melania for the first time, he was kind and generous and funny as hell. Very funny. The First Lady was gracious and smart with a smile that will brighten up any room. If you're watching this tonight, you know our country is in trouble. Just like me. When you go to the store and buy food for your family, you're shocked. When you fill up your gas tank, you're pissed. I know I am. And when you turn on the news, you are just exhausted. Inflation is out of control. And you know in your heart it was not like this under Donald Trump. My message to you tonight comes from a humble place. The left told me to hate Trump, and even worse, to hate the other side, the people who support him. When you cut through the lies, you realize the truth. American families were better when Donald Trump was president. We were safer, wealthier, and stronger. A vote for Donald Trump is a vote to put money back in our pockets and good food on our kids' plates. Yes. Or, as Trump would say, it's a vote to make America great again. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Please welcome Latino American Linda Fornos.
So, listening to the speakers, this is going to go on probably until about 11 o'clock. I mean, it's fascinating to have her as a speaker there. I think she has some 20-odd million Instagram followers.
23 million Instagram followers. So I just have to say, the stagecraft, the sequencing of this whole moment tonight. This is what Donald Trump does best. He's the producer-in-chief, him walking out, Lee Greenwood playing. And then first you're hearing from an everyday American talking, but then a social media influencer with 23 million followers who young people are looking at, and young voters are up for grabs this election. Throw in there also, Donald Trump is now a meme everywhere. You know, best not miss if you're going to shoot the king. Like, this is what is on TikTok. This is what tens of millions of young voters who are not necessarily decided, they don't have longstanding party affiliation, are seeing. He's making a play there. It's very smart. And to be honest, she was one of the most effective communicators we've seen tonight.
I'll admit something. I had no idea who this was. So I looked it up, and then I called a friend of mine, and I said, do you know who this is? And they didn't know. Also a political person. But that's the point. They have put someone on the stage who reaches into this whole group of Americans who are not necessarily engaged at all in our politics or in our civics. These kinds of voices, I heard some grousing about this from some of the conservative. This is how you change the composition of the electorate.
Yeah, that was probably the most dangerous speak for the Democratic coalition. That is a young woman of color. She's describing the experience a lot of people have, feeling that maybe if you're around too many liberals, you might get criticized too much, or you might not be able to speak your mind. And she spoke to it really well. And she's way more famous than any of us up here. Yeah. I'm going to tell you that, way more famous. And so to the extent that these guys are trying to bust up our coalition, that was a bunker buster right there.
By the way, and it's one of the things we've been talking about, but there are speakers who speak to the room, and there are speakers who speak through the television screen. She speaks through the camera to the audience at home, not, I mean, she's effective in the room, but when you're yelling into the room, that is not communicating directly through the lens.
This person is super talented. Okay, like this person knows how to speak plainly and directly, knows how to use the camera, the cadence of it. They got something there.
Yeah, and it really is hard. In those big arenas, it's hard not to want to fill up the room. You want to scream and make sure the grandma in the back can hear you. But you're not talking to the 30,000 people there. You're talking to the 30 million people at home. And she was the most effective. You can be heard in the hall, but you're in somebody's living room. She understood that. And I would not be surprised if she doesn't have a political future.
Yeah, you can tell that she's somebody who makes a living communicating with people on the screen, right? She understood how to connect with the camera. That's what she does. It's part of why she has 23 million Instagram followers.
The only thing, I'm sorry, go ahead. The only thing I would add to that is not only are you speaking to the people watching, but, per some of your, well taken criticisms of some of the earlier African American speakers, they're going to cut these things up into little YouTube videos of 10, 30, TikTok videos, all that kind of stuff. And they'll take highlights, and if they have a good digital operation,
they'll be seen by them.
It's going to be seen by a lot more people.
Speaking of stagecraft that you were mentioning, watching Trump come down that hallway, the way they set it up against Lee Greenwood, who, by the way, also 81 years old, looks pretty good and did a great job. But the way they choreographed that thing, the way they brought Trump out, you could not have done it any better. It was really, really well done. And then to me, I also just seeing the bandage. I mean, I was wondering how they were going to do it. It's pretty
It's terrific.
Pretty real.
Terrific at stagecraft, no question about it. And obviously, this is a moment, given what happened over the weekend, where just seeing him on camera is impactful and meaningful. And I think, as someone, I can't remember who was saying earlier, anybody, even if you're not somebody who supports him, you can still see him in this moment and feel grateful that he was not killed on Saturday. So it's a powerful moment. I think the question is, what version of him do we see over the course of this week? I mean, we've seen speakers tonight who range from Marjorie Taylor Greene to people who are more kind of in the more traditional Republican mold. And so, he has a lot of goodwill tonight. And I think the question is, what version of him do we see later this week?
I just want to say one thing. Just as a dad, seeing Don Jr.'s face. Don Jr. he's a firecracker. He's usually a pretty tough guy, and that I think he wants to be like his dad. But that emotion in his face, I thought was powerful. I think it's okay for everybody just to absorb it.
We're going to listen to Sean O'Brien, president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. Let's listen in.
Greetings, delegates and guests. I'm Sean O'Brien, General President of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. I'd like to give my peeps from the greatest state in the nation, Massachusetts, some props. What's up? First, I want to thank the hardworking Teamsters and union members here in Milwaukee who play vital roles in the building and operations of this convention. I also want to thank President Donald Trump for opening the RNC's doors to the Teamsters Union and inviting me to speak before you tonight. I travel all across this country and meet with my members every week. You know what I see? An American worker being taken for granted. Workers being sold out to big banks, big tech, corporates, and the elite. And I'm not the only one who sees this. Everyday families see it. The American people aren't stupid. They know the system is broken. We all know how Washington is run. Working people have no chance of winning this fight. That's why I'm here today. Because I refuse to keep doing the same things my predecessors did. Today, the Teamsters are here to say we are not beholden to anyone or any party. We will create an agenda and work with a bipartisan coalition ready to accomplish something real for the American worker. And I don't care about getting criticized. It's an honor to be the first Teamster in our 121-year history to address the Republican National Convention. Several months ago, I asked the RNC and the DNC for the opportunity to speak. To be frank, when President Trump invited me to speak at this convention, there was political unrest on the left and on the right. Hard to believe. Anti-union groups demanded the president rescind his invitation. The left called me a traitor. And this is precisely why it's so important for me to be here today. Think about this. Think about this. The Teamsters are doing something correct. If the extremes in both parties think I shouldn't be on this stage. President Trump had the backbone to open the doors to this Republican convention, and that's unprecedented. No other nominee in the race would have invited the Teamsters into this arena. Now, you can have whatever opinion you want, but one thing is clear. President Trump is a candidate who is not afraid of hearing from new, loud, and often critical voices. And I think we all can agree, whether people like him or they don't like him, in light of what happened to him on Saturday, he has proven to be one tough SOB. Now, when I won the presidency of the Teamsters in a national election 2.5 years ago, we started reaching across the aisle. In the past, The Teamsters have endorsed GOP candidates, including Nixon, Reagan, and George H.W. Bush. But over the last 40 years, the Republican Party has really pursued strong relationships with organized labor. There are some in the party who stand in active opposition to labor unions. This, too, must change. And I want to be clear. At the end of the day, the Teamsters are not interested if you have a D, R, or an I next to your name. We want to know one thing. What are you doing to help American workers? As a negotiator, I know that no window or door should ever be permanently shut. In my administration, the Teamsters reached out to 8 Republican senators who stood up for railroad Teamsters over our fight for paid sick leave. Josh Hawley was one of them. We started talking. Senator Hawley changed his position on national right to work. Then we started walking. Senator Hawley walked a Teamsters picket line in St. Louis and a UAW picket line in Wentzville, Missouri. More than that, I want to recognize Senator Hawley for his direct, relentless, and pointed questioning of corporate talking heads, lawyers, CEOs, and apologists. He has shown he is not willing to accept their pillaging of working people's pocketbooks. I know from a career in negotiating that you get nowhere by slamming your fist on the table. The first step is to listen. The Teamsters and the GOP may not agree on many issues, but a growing group has shown the courage to sit down and consider points of view that aren't funded by big money think tanks. Senators like J.D. Vance, Roger Marshall, and Representatives Nicole Malliotakis, Mike Lawler, and Brian Fitzpatrick are among elected officials who truly care about working people. And this group is expanding and is putting fear into those who have monopolized our very broken system in America today. There are far too many people on both sides of the aisle still caught up in knee-jerk reactions to unions, who subscribe to the same tired claptrap that unions destroy American companies. Take a moment to consider United Parcel Service, which is the largest private sector logistics company, and it's been unionized for more than 100 years. More than 350,000 Teamsters make it run. We work for good middle-class wages, quality health care, and secure pensions. There are work rules that ensure fairness and due process for both sides. UPS is the most efficient package delivery company in the world. But let's not forget that UPS doesn't provide these great wages and benefits out of the kindness of its heart. UPS does it because the Teamsters fight for it, all 350,000 of us. You know, corporatists hate when working people join together to form unions. But for a century, major employers have waged a war against labor by forming corporate unions of their own. We need to call the Chamber of Commerce and the business roundtables what they are. They are unions for big business. And here's another fact. Against gigantic multinational corporation, an individual worker has zero power. It's only when Americans band together in democratic unions that we win real improvements on wages, benefits, and working conditions. Companies like Amazon are bigger than most national economies. Amazon is valued over $2 trillion. That makes it the 14th largest economy in the world. What is sickening is that Amazon has abandoned any national allegiance. Amazon's sole focus is on lining its own pockets. Remember, elites have no party, elites have no nation. Their loyalty is to the balance sheet and to the stock price at the expense of the American worker. In my office in Washington, D.C., I can see the United States Capitol from my window. I see well-intentioned people arrive in Washington and get eaten up by an unforgiving system. The responsibility to average Americans takes a back seat. The objective now becomes survival. Fundraiser after fundraiser, corporate consultants hedge every initiative. The Hill crawls with lifers, bouncing from government jobs to corporate jobs and back again. I think we can all agree D.C. is a pretty treacherous area. Most legislation is never meant to go anywhere, and it's all talk. And in America, talk isn't cheap. It's very expensive, and it comes at the cost of our own country. Working people know our system is broken. The elites are not laboring on behalf of workers. There is a political caste system that prevents citizens from accessing their representatives to hold them accountable. For a moment in time, working people in America were seen as essential. Sadly, it took a global pandemic for political and corporate elites to notice this fact. But ask yourself this question. Since the end of the pandemic, when was the last time you heard major news outlets regularly refer to workers as essential? You haven't. The men and women who provide goods and services, deliver packages, stock grocery shelves, care for patients, pick up your trash, and keep our communities safe are taken for granted. All the while, the stock market booms, housing prices hit record highs, and corporate salaries skyrocket. But the income of everyday Americans are shrinking in the face of inflation. At the gas pumps, at the grocery store, with the electrical bill, and with the car insurance. This has got to change. Never forget, American workers own this nation. We are not renters. We are not tenants. But the corporate elite treat us like squatters, and that is a crime. We've got to fix it. Now, this will shock you. This will shock you. To paraphrase Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, it's time for both sides of Congress to stand their butts up. We need trade policies that put American workers first. It needs to be easier for companies to remain in America. We need legal protections that make it safer for workers to get a contract. We must stop corporations from abandoning local communities to inflate their bottom line. We need meaningful bankruptcy reform. Today, corporate vultures buy up companies like Yellow Freight with the intent of driving them into bankruptcy and feasting on their remains. The courts leave workers begging for crumbs as third-tier creditors. Labor law must be reformed. Americans vote for a union but can never get a union contract. Companies fire workers who try to join unions and hide behind toothless laws that are meant to protect working people but are manipulated to benefit corporations. This is economic terrorism at its best. An individual cannot withstand such an assault. A fired worker cannot afford corporate delays, and these greedy employers know it. There are no consequences for the company, only the worker. We need corporate welfare reform. Under our current system, massive companies like Amazon, Uber, Lyft, and Walmart take zero responsibilities for the workers they employ. These companies offer no real health insurance, no retirement benefits, no paid leave, relying on underfunded public assistance. And who foots the bill? The individual taxpayer. The biggest recipients of welfare in this country are corporations, and this is real corruption. We must put workers first. What could be more important to the security of our nation than a long-term investment in the American worker? In 2021, Teamsters nationwide elected me to fight for them, and that's precisely what I'm doing. Something is wrong in this country, and we need to say it out loud. I will always speak for America and the American worker, both union and non-union. I challenge each and every one of you, and especially my friends on the Democratic side, to embrace cooperation, to truly collaborate, to achieve meaningful and productive change, to ensure we make this great nation in this world the bigger, faster, and strongest nation in the entire world. I love this country. The Teamsters love this country. Our 1.3 million members move America on the roads, in the ports, on the rail, and in the air. And at the end of the day, if the powers to be stop me from raising my voice on behalf of American workers, I will not have one single regret. I still carry my commercial driver's license. I still have my place on the union seniority list. You'll find me back in Boston driving a tractor-trailer, delivering equipment for Shaughnessy and Ahern, because I have the protection of a union contract that gives me the freedom to speak my mind and to fight like hell. God bless the greatest nation. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back RNC Chairman Michael Whatley.
That was interesting. I got a text in the middle of that from a Republican congressman saying that he had to check to make sure he was at the Republican convention, not the Democratic convention. That was Sean O'Brien, president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, making an appeal to the delegates to embrace a more worker-friendly agenda. One has to observe that President Trump opposed an increase in the minimum wage, put a bunch of corporate lawyers on the National Labor Relations Board, and on and on and on. You can Google it. Very interesting. One little thing to clear up, just if anybody didn't get the reference, he quoted Senator Markwayne Mullin of Oklahoma, and he said it was interesting that he would quote him because he and Markwayne Mullin, Senator Mullin, last November almost got into a fist fight during a Senate Health and Labor Pension Committee hearing. We don't have to go into the reasons behind it, but let's just say that Sean O'Brien does not consider Senator Mullin to be too pro-labor.
No.
In any case, this was a very interesting speech. I'm not really sure how much it belongs when it comes to the actual policies of the Republican Party.
Donald Trump is desperate to get the endorsement from the Teamsters. The fact that Sean O'Brien showed up here, I mean, this was peppered throughout his entire speech, was very controversial because it has been decades since the Teamsters did anything other than support Democrats. He got a lot of pushback among many of his members when he went to meet with Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. But he clearly wanted to be here at this convention to push his agenda and also give a warning to Joe Biden and the Democrats that his endorsement and the support of his 1.3 million members cannot be and should not be taken for granted.
Well, I'll tell you, he gave a rip-roaring populist speech. I mean, a vigorous assault on corporate America, a very strong pro-union speech all delivered in an idiom that John King particularly appreciates because it was all in. But I noticed that there weren't a whole lot of people standing. I'm not sure how this landed. I think people were confused, like the guy who
Trump
texted.
stood for the whole
not
thing.
about them.
No, it's
he
not.
stood for the whole speech. This is the okay. Earlier today there was a long conversation about Joe Biden, but this is the case for Joe Biden. He improved on Hillary Clinton's performance with union households by about 5 percentage points. In a very close election, that is incredibly significant. Joe Biden was chosen by Barack Obama in part because he could speak to these types of people. He performed better than Hillary Clinton because he could speak to working class white Americans, to union households, union workers. He walked a picket line earlier this year. If you're trying to make a case for Joe Biden, it's on this particular issue. I think this is still why Biden's advisors are saying the fundamentals of Joe Biden's appeal to the weakest part of the Democratic coalition, which is white working class men, are still intact. We'll see if that's true, but that is their case.
If that were true, I don't know that the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters would be speaking at the Republican National Convention.
Well, that's exactly what this showcases is Joe Biden's problem, because Teamsters endorsed President Biden in 2020, and the idea that he is a Teamsters leader has never spoken at a Republican convention, and to see Sean O'Brien
not at least in 121 years.
Okay, thank you for that count. So I think that just speaks to the moment.
Let me just interrupt for 1
battle
second. I want to go to Phil Mattingly on the floor, and then we'll come back and keep talking. Phil?
You know, Jake, as you guys kind of walk through the dynamics of the speech and what we actually heard, watching the former president, watching the people in the VIP box who did not sit down the entire speech, who, when Sean O'Brien said he'd been the first Teamsters president to speak to a Republican convention and 121 years, it was Byron Donalds, who has been sitting next to the former president, who slapped Trump's arm and said, "That's huge. That's huge." It was Tucker Carlson sitting to the right of Byron Donalds, who was pumping his fists the entire time. And you contrast that with where the rest of the party is, particularly on this issue, but also the same party that's holding fundraisers with corporations and large donors over the course of this entire week. I think we all know that's such a central part of this process. That was a speech that was for Sean O'Brien a moment to take advantage of. It was a speech for the former president, who sees a clear ability to peel off the union vote in a significant way on the rank and file side of things. And it was also, I think, a window into a realignment on the policy of the Republican Party, a policy that J.D. Vance, while not fully kind of in the Josh Hawley model of things, who Sean O'Brien shouted out to, is certainly more towards that populist level than, say, Speaker Mike Johnson, who was also sitting in that box, who very much represents kind of a Wall Street Journal editorial board, kind of traditional establishment Republican economic ideology. And so just the entire contrast of listening to the speech, watching Sean O'Brien, definitely getting the Dorchester versus Medford, John King versus Sean O'Brien accents going there, but also watching the people in the VIP box and who they represent for the party now and for the party in the future was absolutely fascinating, Jake.
One of the things that's so interesting about it, John King, is that there is this strain of populism in the Republican Party. It is by no means predominant, but it is the J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Josh Hawley strain that does think that the Republican Party needs to change and adapt to the American worker. Those policies were not embraced during the Trump administration, at least not if you look at what the Teamsters have on their policy agenda or the AFL-CIO, et cetera. But there is this internal fight going on. Sean O'Brien, I'm sure, sagely understands that is going on, and there are people who are listening. That doesn't mean that the agenda is going to be adopted, but it is worth noting.
Mr. Mattingly needs to be corrected that we tend to skip the D when we say Medford in Boston. We just say Medford. That's how it goes. Look, there's a fascinating debate within all of America's blue-collar unions about this. Donald Trump did pretty well, especially with working-class union men against Hillary Clinton. Abby's right. Joe Biden improved on those numbers. I've been in Michigan with the United Auto Workers Group, and they have endorsed Joe Biden, and yet on the factory floor they say they expect around 40%, maybe even higher, to vote for Donald Trump. Because these are voters who, yes, of course, care about labor issues and organizing and collective bargaining and pay, but they also care about guns. They also care about other issues. And so this has been a divide brewing for some time. And Trump does make inroads. And what you see here is there is a huge fight within the Teamsters Union about him being here. His deputy was on Aaron Burnett not that long ago, essentially saying we should be endorsing Joe Biden on policy. There are African-American groups within the Teamsters that say, how dare you come here, given Donald Trump's record and other issues. But he has decided to stick his neck out. And what it is it's a green light. The Teamsters may not endorse. That would be a big deal if they do not endorse. There's a big debate over whether to do it. He clearly wanted to come here and speak, and you saw Trump and J.D. Vance like saying yes afterwards, because it's a green light to those union members who might think, on the labor policies, of course we should be with Biden. He is the most pro-union president in anybody at this table's lifetime. That's a fact. On policy, union policy, labor policy. But on other issues, it's a green light to say, go Trump.
Yeah, and look, John, as you were just saying, that 40%, Trump got about 40% of labor households in both 2016 and in 2020. So he's there, right? Like, he has some of that rank and file support. The question is, is it enough in the right places for it to matter the most? And the key thing, I think, with union households and union support is that not every union is the same. And in a lot of the unions, they are a diverse group of people, and that racial divide is part of what is playing out in terms of who supports Biden, who supports Trump, and where the peeling off is happening in this country.
So as we hear the dulcet tones of Journey playing in the background, Caitlin Collins, we heard the gavel come down, and that is officially the end of the day in terms of official business here, although Donald Trump's still soaking up the crowd, enjoying the celebration and the love of him. There was another chant of "We Love Trump" that broke out, Caitlin. And it's been quite a day.
Well, and two things just on how Saturday night has changed this. I spoke to Eric Trump earlier, and he said that when he was on the phone with his dad while he was still in the hospital, he was talking about the Republican convention and what this was going to look like. And so obviously that has shifted this. The other thing, just from being on the floor all day, I'll tell you, obviously they chant Donald Trump, they chant USA. The new thing that they are chanting is exactly what you heard from Donald Trump when after he nearly missed that shot on Saturday night. The fight, fight, fight. That has become a new motto that you are hearing from delegates and surrogates and allies on the floor at this Republican convention this week.
Yeah, Anderson?
Watching the former president slowly make his way out of the convention hall as this first night wraps up. Jonah Goldberg, you have been watching this, I don't know how many hours today.
Been here a while.
About 12 hours almost, I think.
Something like that.
Yeah.
The longest week I ever spent was the 10 hours I spent watching this convention. No,
what do you make of this wrapping up the first night?
Yeah, so I think, we've all said how he was a showman. I was kind of surprised. I expected a little more also spoke Zarathustra, Elvis in Vegas music than what we got when he came in. There was a little less of a pomp and circumstance thing. And I think in part because he actually seems like he's been humbled a little bit, or at least that's what he wants to put forward. I do think that this is a sign of how inchoate the GOP coalition is. One of the long-term political story of the last half century is the continued dissolution of the FDR coalition and the GOP's ability to take different pieces of it. You see that with J.D. Vance, who is not a party unifier, right? He is not someone that every branch of the party likes. It is doubling down on the MAGA definition of things. You saw it with Amber Rose. You saw it with the head of the Teamsters. The head of the Teamsters was saying this stuff about how great unions are and all that, and that's his job, and he should say it, and he makes many fine points. But it's in Wisconsin, and I think one of the heads of the delegation from Wisconsin is Scott Walker, who, the last time we didn't have Trump on a ballot, fought a hammer and tongs war with unions in the state, and he was not a huge fan of the Teamsters. This is a real schism that is being opened up here, and I was waiting, almost pleading, for this guy to call for Elon Musk to unionize Tesla, just to see the open floor fight that would bring, right? But there are tectonic shifts going on in here that are going to be playing out for a while.
That's what was most striking to me, is just the remaking of the Republican Party in the image of Donald Trump. And it was notable to me, the people who aren't there tonight, obviously former Vice President Mike Pence, a traditional conservative, is not. Mitt Romney is not there. Paul Ryan is not there. The former standard bearers of conservatism are not present because this is much more a nationalist populist party. And the choice of Vance is so interesting because this is Donald Trump looking beyond his term if he's reelected, and who is going to carry on his legacy, who is going to implement those policies going forward, who could potentially set up one of his children to run for office someday, to run on this MAGA populist platform.
I think it is also going to be so interesting to see as the convention unfolds this week what the party does to try to reach specifically these suburban women that they need. I mean, you saw, Katie Britt spoke tonight, the woman earlier in the program, the single mother who was talking about her life experience. I mean, you saw them try to really, really reach out on the cost of living argument, where they obviously feel they have a lot of runway. But, not surprisingly, but, you didn't hear anything about reproductive freedom, about choice. And we know that's an issue that is significant for suburban women. So I think it'll be interesting to see as you're talking about kind of these pieces of the Republican coalition. That's another big piece. And there wasn't that much time tonight dedicated to speaking specifically to suburban women. And I'll just be interested to see how that evolves over the course of the week.
Well, it's just the first night.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
We got a whole week of stuff. If you consumed all the media of this convention tonight, and then you also watched the Biden interview, which we talked about, what's amazing to me is that Trump got shot, and Biden's the one who's angry. I mean, he snapped at Lester Holt several times tonight. He's not in a good place. And yet Donald Trump, who just got his ear shot off, is out here walking around, smiling, looking emotional as he basks in the glow of this convention. Trump got shot, and Biden is the one who is angry. We've been told for so long, Donald Trump's angry. He's vengeful. He's going to be out here with a clenched fist. That's not what you saw on your television screen tonight. I
think we should see how that comment ages.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, as you said, this was just the first night. He didn't speak tonight. So let's put a pin in that.
What he looked like to me.
Let's put a pin in that and see how that ages.
I think tonight he looked humble and hopefully he'll stay that way. But I wouldn't bet a lot on it. But what I would say is, what you called an inchoate coalition. I see it as the Republicans are trying to eat our cookies. We've had some cookies called the black vote, and they're trying to take those cookies. We've had the labor vote. They're trying to take those cookies. And a governing coalition is inchoate.
Right.
That's what political leadership is. It's the ability to hold together a coalition that would ordinarily not form. And the challenge, I think, for the Democratic Party is that we had a governing coalition called the Obama Coalition. And we had high hopes and aspirations for that coalition. We thought that as the country got browner, our party would get bigger. This looks like maybe that was maybe a little aspirational on our part, because the country is getting browner, and yet so is the Republican Party. And so there's something happening here tonight that I think Democrats who want to win in November should take very, very close note of. You cannot take our voters for granted, Democrats, labor, black, female, or otherwise.
And we are going to continue our coverage here for the next hour with this panel, and also up as the team at the convention. We have more coverage starting right now.
Let's take another look at the emotional capper of this opening night of the Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Donald Trump entering the hall to love and applause, his ear bandaged, a visible reminder of that bullet that hit him during the attempt on his life on Saturday. The former president, now the official nominee of the Republican Party for a third consecutive time. He was joined in the Trump family viewing box by his newly named running mate, Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio. An eventful day amid truly extraordinary circumstances surrounding this convention. Let's go to Kristen Holmes. Kristen, what are you hearing from the Trump campaign, from Trump allies, about his appearance today, which seemed to be quite emotional for him?
Yeah, it clearly was. Jake, this is somebody that I've now been covering for over a year. This is the most emotional I have ever seen him, and I have certainly seen him in what could have been various vulnerable positions. But Donald Trump himself, talking to his allies, the people who know him the best, people who hadn't seen him yet in public until this situation, they were shocked at what they saw. They said he appeared softer, that at times it looked as though he might cry. They said that they themselves were crying. I even spoke to people who used to support Donald Trump who no longer do, who said that it made them choke up, that this was an incredibly emotional experience and they felt like they were seeing a different person up on that stage or in that box when he entered onto the convention floor. The other thing to point out here is that Donald Trump himself has been telling people, both publicly and privately, that he believes that he is lucky to be alive, that he believes that there was some sort of divine intervention. Of course, that is notable given the fact that Donald Trump, we know, is not a religious person. He's not even a spiritual person. But this is something he has said over and over again, that he fundamentally believes that he shouldn't be alive right now, that there is some reason he tilted his head the way that he did to look up at that chart, and that is what kept him alive. And we saw a lot of that in his face tonight, and that is what allies said as well, that they just felt like this was so much more of a human being than they had ever seen the former president look before.
All right, let's go over to Boris Sanchez now. He is near the convention stage here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Boris, tell us what it was like from your vantage point when former President Trump made his entrance.
Yeah, Jake, it was an extremely emotional moment. I'm sitting just across from that VIP area. I could see the actual podium where we heard speakers tonight, and I could see the way that the president was responding, not only to them, but to the crowd. When his face first appeared on the Jumbotron, there was an audible sound from the crowd, elation, and literally thousands of people taking out their phones to get ready for his appearance. Once he finally emerged, Kristen was just outlining the emotional response from the president. I saw several people in the crowd appearing to be emotional themselves, really the power of the moment landing heavily on them. And throughout the evening, you could see the responses from folks not only in the crowd, but also the speakers. When we watched Amber Rose seeming to charm the former president, he appeared to make several remarks. I watched him make a comment to Congressman Byron Donalds and now the presumptive vice presidential nominee, J.D. Vance, during her speech, all the way to Sean O'Brien when the president stayed standing during the entire speech, seemingly expressionless. I did watch Byron Donalds sort of make a gesture to him, but he was very receptive of what was going on. And one interesting thing, I'm not sure if the cameras could capture this, but a large portion of the crowd over by that VIP area wasn't even turned to the speakers. They didn't turn away from the president once he emerged after the speeches began. But overall, obviously, a very powerful moment for this crowd that was eager to see the president all the way toward the end of the benediction, watching the president in that moment, as Kristen outlined, not known for his spirituality, but seeming to absorb the importance of the moment, Jake.
All right, Boris, thank you so much. And let us talk about the biggest thing that happened at this convention today, other than Donald Trump appearing in public for the first time with the bandage on his ear after the assassination attempt on his life just 2 days ago. And Dana Bash, that is, of course, the selection, the nomination of J.D. Vance, a Republican senator from Ohio, who was one of the very first and most outspoken Republican critics of Donald Trump back in 2015, 2016. He was at the time known as a commentator, the author of Hillbilly Elegy. I think we have a mashup of some of the things that J.D. Vance, you see J.D. Vance there earlier today with the guy at the top of the ticket, Donald Trump. I think we have a mashup of some of the things he said back then, followed by comments that he made earlier tonight on Fox, in which he tried to explain where those remarks came from.
Half of the things that he says don't make any sense, or a quarter of the things that he says are offensive. I might have to hold my nose and vote for Hillary Clinton. I can't stomach Trump. I think that he's noxious and is